Welcome to Creating Space with me, Martin Bone. This is episode 2 with a mate of mine, Gavin Kendrick. Gavin is a sexual healer, a practicing druid, a musician and an all-round boss human being. He was born and raised in Liverpool, and in his early years he became a very successful DJ in Liverpool and beyond. His life is very interesting and has taken him on a journey of self-discovery, co-creation and psychedelics. He speaks with the wisdom and sincerity of an elder and has a lot of eclectic ideas which he has drawn upon from his life so far. We touch on many different topics here in this conversation, ranging from entheogens or psychedelics, pleasure activism, cooperative living, ceremony, initiation, druidry and music. It was a treat to get Gavin behind the mic, getting a taste of his life. I hope you draw upon the awareness and inspiration from which he speaks. It's heartfelt and real. Thank you so much, bro, for the great conversation. A down-to-earth, ordinary man living an extraordinary life, following his highest ecstasy and travelling the world with a level of fearlessness and connectivity. A great example for us all. My intention for all of the conversations we do on Creating Space is to have fun and open one's mind and allow a platform offering new perspectives, re-education and realisation. Enjoy.
I love doing yoga, I love doing a couple of classes a week.
Allow us to journey into these altered states.
It really whacked me psyche though, big time.
If you just sit reading books, it's the shadow because you're not going to be in your body.
Welcome to Creating Space, bringing people together. Real conversations with real people, telling stories and sharing our gifts right here in the heart of Liverpool, inspiring new ideas, education and co-creation.
Choose a challenge that lights you up and is going to make a difference in the world.
Creating Space.
Sponsored by the Scouse Guru app.
Okay, welcome back to Creating Space with me, Martin Bone. This is episode 2, and today I've got a really great episode with a friend of mine and a dear brother, Gavin Kendrick. Welcome to the show, Gavin.
Thanks very much for creating space to welcome me.
Yeah, man. It's been a really nice weekend, hasn't it? We've spent the whole weekend in Planet Yoga, and there's been like a lot of conscious music, hot yoga, meditation ceremony, great food, hanging out, microdosing mushrooms, and I've loved every minute of it. So how's it been for you?
It's been incredible. It's been over a month since I've been back, and to see the space evolving as it is really inspiring, and to see this community growing and flourishing in so many ways. There was the amazing concert with Ravi on Friday night in the new room, which is being developed.
The Zen Room. And just as we were preparing for the podcast, I saw another cacao ceremony starting downstairs. Yeah. So been a lot going on this weekend. It's the studio just seems to be getting bigger and better, and there's I think a lot of people now. Planet Yoga is like on the map. Do you know what I mean? And I feel as if it's certainly one of the leading yoga centres in Liverpool, for this sort of community, people growing and people coming together. And it's been a bit of a whirlwind for you, hasn't it? I know you're having long just come from Gabon and you're going to New York next week, and what a contrast that is, you know what I mean? Tell me a little bit about that then, especially let's lean into Gabon and what's your relationship with that part of the world. Obviously want to talk about a lot of things today, and entheogens is one of them. So yeah, let's dive into that and see how it unfolds.
So my background was in the music industry. I was working as a DJ for about 15 years, and from there I started to work in festivals and did artist liaison event management for festivals in the UK and in Croatia. And during that time I was exploring music from different parts of the world, and it was polyrhythms which was my final destination when I found something that completely brought me to life musically. And I heard a harpist in the UK who was playing an ngombe, which is an 8-string harp from Central Africa. And associated with the ngombe, with the sacred harp from Gabon, is a tradition called bwiti, which uses a plant medicine called Iboga, or Le Bois Sacré, the sacred wood. And the style of playing the harp has developed alongside the ritual use of Iboga. And so they intertwine beautifully. And I was completely blown away by the states of consciousness which are induced by this hypnotic instrument combined with this very powerful plant.
Lovely. I mean, you talk about states of consciousness there. What does that mean to you?
So I've experienced an everyday waking state of consciousness where my analytical mind is very active. And as I was growing up, I had some spontaneous mystical experiences which were quite gentle but profound. And I didn't really have a context within which to understand what was happening. This began to happen when I was about 10 or 11. And it was always related to music. And I'd notice changes in my body, changes in my mind. Colours would become more vibrant, sounds would become more acute. And then when I was in my late teens, I discovered Psilocybin mushrooms. And I'd found a way to reliably induce these altered states. And so that became my passion right through my 20s. Initially taking big doses on solo journeys out in nature, which was sometimes chaotic, sometimes very beautiful. And then I found ceremonies and the ritual use of these plants. And that's when I understood the container and how important it is to have a container within which to take these plant journeys and to experience these different ways of seeing the world, different ways of relating to myself, relating to the people around me. And so my work has been discovering techniques and ways to integrate the gifts we can receive from these altered states and how we can integrate them into our everyday lives so we can live more from the heart.
Wow, sounds really interesting. So, you talk about ceremonies there. Let's dive into that then. Tell me a little bit about, what is a ceremony? And, for anyone listening today, it's let's dive in and sort of feel into how these things play out and what's it all for, what's it designed for, and what are we cultivating? And because I've personally sat in many ceremonies with yourself. I've been really fortunate enough to share that space and and to dive into these this way of being, really, this way of life. To celebrate ourselves and to use a lot of different instruments. To obviously guide you through the journey. And so from the start, what is a ceremony and what is the benefit of sitting in ceremony, and how's it been a massive part of your life, and how are things unfolding for you in that way?
That's a great question. I suppose the simplest way to explain what a ceremony can be is a period of time which is set aside from anything else that might be happening on a particular day, in a particular night. And there are rules of engagement within a ceremony, and there are rites and there are protocols which induce altered states of consciousness. And as human beings, we've evolved to have rituals, and there are many rituals, which could be the ritual of rolling a cigarette. In tobacco, there's a ritual of making a cup of tea in the morning, but there are other rituals which have more powerful effects. And a ceremony is a space where certain rules are in place which allow us to journey into these altered states in a way that mitigates some of the risks which can come with altering our consciousness chemically, whether that's through ingesting a plant substance or simply by a practice like Kundalini Yoga, for example, is a very powerful way to alter consciousness. Breath work. I know some of your friends have been with Wim Hof over the weekend, and some of the cold water practices can really jolt our mind into a very different state. And so ceremonies have evolved in all different cultures as a way to journey collectively in these ways, in a way that's supportive, in a way that reduces the risks of changing our consciousness, but also in a way to bind communities together.
Yeah. Lovely. So tell me about your first ceremony. How did that one unfold for you? Where was that? How did it unfold? How did you hear about the ceremonies?
My first ceremony was working with a plant from the Amazon called Ayahuasca, and I was invited to come and experience this. It was something that had been on my radar for years, and I hadn't found anywhere where I could experience it. And then I was invited to go on this journey. And there were certain rules, as always, to the ceremony. The participants we had to dress in white. There was live music, there was recorded music, and when I took the medicine for the first time, it was it was very strong, and it was very visual, and I had an interesting time. But I actually didn't enjoy the rules and regulations of the ceremony. At that point, I was still experiencing solo mushroom journeys, and I hadn't really let go of control of how I wanted the experience to be. And so I walked away thinking it was a powerful moment in my life, but I was still preferring to be at home and not wear my white pajamas and not listen to music that I didn't really love. Coming from a music background, I was a bit of a snob still. But my friend who I went to the ceremony with wants to go back and experience it again, and it was the second time I went back, and once I was familiar with what to expect, I saw the art and the science behind the rules of the ceremony, and realized how that was elevating the experience to places that we simply can't get to unless we're performing these rituals together as a collective, as a group of people.
And I know you've been now involved in a lot of ceremonies over the past few years, you know, with all different types of medicines. So, you know, not just ayahuasca, but psilocybin and iboga. So how have things changed for you then? You know, let's lean back into Gabon for a moment. You know, I know you've been there quite a number of times over the last couple of years. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah.
You know, what is the pull to Gabon? I know you've been talking about the harp and the polyrhythms, but obviously with this journey of iboga, what's the difference between iboga, ayahuasca, psilocybin? You know, obviously they're all altering our state of consciousness. But yeah, if you can elaborate on it and just roll with it and see where it goes.
That's an interesting invitation to speak about the differences between the plant medicines. Subjectively, I'd say that ayahuasca is a medicine of the heart, and it really works on the emotional body and helps us to clear blockages and traumas that we're holding. Iboga is maybe a medicine of the mind, sometimes described as breaking open the head. And the first time I ate the wood, I was taken back through my childhood, and I saw in visions these pivotal moments where something had happened to me or I'd done a certain thing. And that created a pattern of behaviour that I was still playing out in my 30s. And I had no idea that some of the habitual behaviours I had, both good and bad, were related to these childhood experiences so specifically. And so the amount of self-knowledge I gained from those first ceremonies was completely profound. And so that quest for self-knowledge combined with the mind-blowing experience of the harp led me to Gabon. I had to go to the root and to experience where this was coming from, to meet the tradition in its homeland. And so my initiation into the tradition of Bwiti was 2 years ago, and it was a 3-week trip to Libreville, the capital of Gabon. And it's a branch of Bwiti called Mboma Nadeswala, which translates loosely as the feathered serpent or the python with wings. And it's a combination of two different branches. One is Fang Bwiti, which was a branch of the tradition that was heavily Christianized by missionaries. And so the Fang people embraced the symbolism of Christianity, but mapped it onto the traditional Fang cosmology. And so it's a hybrid tradition. And the other branch is from the Masoko people. And this is a forest Bwiti. When the missionaries came, the Masoko retreated back to the forest and preserved a very traditional way of working with the wood. And the lineage that I work in combines both of them in the same initiation experience.
Wow. And how was you received in Gabon? You know, what's the community like? What's the way of life out there?
The people in the village where I stay have been the greatest teachers in my life. The situation in Gabon, in post-colonial Gabon, is pretty dire. The effects of colonization have completely ravaged the country. Yet within the difficulty of that is an incredible openness and a beauty in living, and a beauty in community. And despite the struggle, just an incredible warmth and graciousness and a deep and profound spirituality.
Wow.
And so the people I've met there have shaped my life in so many ways. And wow. I'm always humbled, and I'm always on my knees when I think of my friends in that part of the world.
Wow. I mean, you know, sort of going back here, I know you were a DJ for a long time, and you know, sort of life as a DJ in Liverpool, and then talking about Gabon and and all these plant medicines, and now you've sort of dived into this way of being. Do you feel like it's just been flowing? Is it just that sort of happened? Or, obviously there was a level of sort of wanting and looking for something, and then having certain experiences in your life. Because I know that took you on a journey of like Druidry and magic school and all that. So there's a lot in there, really, isn't there? Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, my understanding of the art of DJing is very similar to the art of guiding a ceremony.
Yeah.
If we think about a festival situation or a nightclub situation, we've got a group of people who are gathering together and being guided by music to express ourselves in a collective way, to celebrate and to release. And the role of a DJ is to guide that journey, to ride the waves, and to bring people together into collective ecstasy, but also to bring people down into moments of calm and stillness, and to ride that journey through the night. And that's exactly what happens in a plant medicine ceremony. The person who's guiding the ceremony is choosing the right song or the right prayer, or inviting the right musician to play in each moment. And I say the right song or the right musician, it's very subjective, and so it really is an art form, very similar to the role of the DJ.
Yeah.
And so it was a natural transition for me to make that journey.
Wow.
And it's one that I'm still in love with today.
Because I know you play a lot of instruments now, don't you? And you moved into sort of a lot more of a sound therapy and using even the magic medicine of cacao, and you've got a website, Sound of Dusk, is it?
Yeah, there's a website, Sound of Dusk, which where I talk a bit about the sound therapy that I trained in. That was a school in Spain called the International School of Sound Therapy, and that was really the first transition away from being a DJ, where I could, I was taught how certain instruments, certain frequencies introduced at the right moment could reliably induce an altered state of consciousness, and could shape the experience of a group of people who gathered together collectively. So it was a very natural next step from being a DJ to building a collection of instruments rather than a collection of records.
Because it holds the space, doesn't it, for people to, I suppose, have these divine revelations and to go on this journey, this internal arena, and just to invite, I suppose, again, opening the heart space, learning a new language, changing a paradigm, all of this stuff. I think nowadays psychedelics it's certainly on the radar, isn't it? Especially when people are talking about psilocybin and mushrooms. There's a bit of a movement with the microdosing. I know over in like Silicon Valley and stuff like that. So, I know you've been taking mushrooms for quite some time, and you explore heroic doses, ceremony, and microdosing. How are you weaving this into your life then, with regards to being a druid, playing musical instruments, and taking mushrooms? Like, how is daily life to you, I suppose?
That's a great question. I suppose I describe myself as a conservative psychonaut. So entheogens have been a huge part of my life since my late teens, but I'm careful about what I put into my body, and I have taken huge doses of mushrooms, but I don't generally do that anymore. I think in my mid-20s I was out camping on my own and took must have been about 25 grams of cubensis.
Wow.
Which was an earth-shattering experience, and it really made me slow down in terms of what I was doing. I was kind of pushing the boundaries and asking the question of how far does this go? And the answer was very far.
What was you looking for? Was you looking for anything in particular, or do you think it was the ego maybe just...
It was completely the ego.
Yeah.
I just wanted to see how far does this go, and I wasn't approaching it with the reverence that I do now with any plant. And the practice of Druidry, the tradition of Druidry, has been a really helpful influence in working with nature. And cultivating a reverence that I wasn't brought up with, growing up in a city, in an industrial culture.
How did Druidry pop into your life?
My first introduction was from a bookshop in Liverpool called News from Nowhere, which has been open since the 70s, and it's a a collective of women at a radical feminist bookshop, and that really shaped a lot of that was my real education.
Yeah.
I did go to school, but my education came from that bookshop. And there was a book called Living Druidry by Emma Restel Orr, and that really opened my eyes and opened my mind to the raw power of nature.
Yeah.
And some of the practices I took from that book about spending time alone in nature and opening my awareness outside of my own mind, maybe for the first time, and to listen to the sound of a river for hour upon hour.
Wow.
And notice where that took me. And again, they were explorations without a context initially. And then I studied with the Order of Bards, Ovates and Druids, which is one of the biggest Druid orders in the world. And they offer a correspondence course, which guides us through a whole series of rituals. It takes a number of years to complete their training. And that gave me a framework.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was a really great teaching. And
Lovely.
it was a formal teaching, but the real teacher is nature.
Of course.
And spending time
And
in
so
nature.
individually, you've took a lot from that, and I suppose now you collectively you're teaching other people, you're holding the space in that way. I've personally been involved in some ceremonies with yourself, and for you to guide people in this way, it does feel really clean and nourishing. So yeah, it seems to be something which isn't so alive in the West. Do you know what I mean? Like, you know, I was christened in the West, and I'm a Catholic. So anything like Druidry and nature, we miss out that connection, don't we? I feel like I've been domesticated. We work in boxes, we live in boxes. There's a lot of sort of that conditioning, left brain sort of way of life, and then introducing myself to meeting people like yourself, and I'm going on that journey. It's certainly opened my eyes, you know what I mean, to feeling into what's out there and the potential magic. But it's all in nature, isn't it? The lessons are there, especially like even just going out into nature. The stillness is a big teacher, isn't it? And it's only been recently where I feel like I'm just starting to get that connection, to nature, getting outside and exploring different ways of being, really.
I'm just thinking about you asking me what every day looks like, and you've touched on something with stillness, and that's my main practice right now, and my discipline that I'm cultivating in my life is to slow down.
Yeah.
And to bring stillness into more and more things that I do.
Yeah, modern times is so fast, isn't it, nowadays?
Completely.
We're in the age of information, and everyone's just just bouncing around, buzzing around, and no one's really giving themselves a container to step back. And I think there's a fine line between like making things happen, but also letting things happen and taking the foot off the gas. So you work for yourself. I know you've moved into more of like a sexual sort of healing and sex education, and I know that inspires you. So how's that weaving into your life then? Where's that one coming from?
So the part of the work I do is as a somatic sex educator, and I suppose anybody who's on a path of nature spirituality eventually will come to deal with the life force which flows through the body and the arousal and pleasure which we experience as humans. And so I was very interested in Neo-Tantra originally. I studied the work of Diana Richardson, who wrote some really incredible books. If anybody's interested, I recommend a book called Slow Sex and Tantric Orgasm for Women, which she says is a book for men, and Tantric Sex for Men, which she says is a book for women. And I was exploring the practices from these books with my lovers, and completely fascinated by what was possible to experience in my own body. So in the same way I could engage with different ways of being out in nature, or different ways of being with mushrooms, or eventually with ayahuasca, I was also experiencing very different states of consciousness through lovemaking in these practices. And so again, just like my journey with mushrooms, I was studying a lot of this stuff on my own. And then I found the C School of Embodiment, which is based in Dawlish in Devon, and they offer a training in the UK called Sexological Bodywork. And so I trained as a CSB, and a year later I trained as a somatic sex educator, and now I've joined the teaching team for this year's training.
Wow.
And that's become a huge part of the work I do.
Wow, there's a lot going on for you at the moment, yeah?
Absolutely. And an interesting story about that, the practice of sexological bodywork was developed in the 80s it began in the 80s with someone called Joseph Kramer. And he told me 2 years ago when I met him, when he found out my interest in mushrooms, he told me that all of his work began with magic mushrooms, and that he wants to find a way to bring people to the state of consciousness that he was experiencing with mushrooms for people who couldn't take psychedelics. And so he used sexuality and arousal and pleasure as the gateway. But he didn't talk about that openly for decades because of the reputation psychedelics had. But now we're coming full circle, and people are really embracing the benefits of working with these substances. He's come out of the psychedelic closet and is now talking more about the origins of his work.
Because it's been such a taboo subject, isn't it? You know, like pleasure, sexuality, and mushrooms. You know, I suppose there's been a lot of sort of underground movements for quite some time, but there just feels this sense that everyone's a lot more open nowadays, and you know that they're exploring different ways of being, and you know, when we're looking at sex education, I think in this country, you know, we're in the UK, and I mean, looking at my own sex education, I don't think I ever had any. There might have been, you know, a little video in a biology lesson one time, and because I suppose we've lost this art of actually how to communicate with other people, you know, sexually as well. And obviously with the massive movements of porn, and I feel as if, you know, a lot of men especially, you know, are very warped and twisted around sexuality and how to please themselves, and the same for women. I mean, it seemed to be, I suppose, an act of, you know, it's like dirty, isn't it, to sort of arouse yourself, you know what I mean? It's all like closed doors, and there's a lot of guilt and shame around it, isn't there? And I know this is a massive part of your life where you are actually applying it into your own existence, and you feel like, I suppose, a mature, healthy, you know, loving man who can be generative to, you know, the people that you're spending time with, sexually and I suppose intimately, just in authentic connections with others.
Yeah, you've touched on something really important, and that is the guilt and the shame that we're conditioned with as young people, especially around self-pleasure. And it all ties into to stillness, it ties into presence, and it ties into communication. Unless we can be present to what's happening in our own bodies, then we can never experience the full range of pleasure which is possible in this vessel. And it's also a gift of psychedelics, of how if we take a microdose of mushrooms, then all of a sudden all of our senses are heightened. In a very subtle way. We can still go about our daily lives. We can drive a vehicle safely. We can do everything we need to do. But part of our awareness rests in the body, and that's the foundation for, in my opinion, for a healthy sexuality, is can we maintain our awareness in the body with our own pleasure? And if we're able to do that, then we can learn to ask for what we want.
Yeah.
Because we know what feels good.
Yeah.
For so many of us, our pleasure exists in fantasy. In our work, we'd call that an indirect route to pleasure. And that's what pornography is. It's experiencing arousal in the body through seeing somebody else experiencing something pleasurable.
Yeah.
So it's indirect. And so the transition that with some of my clients who are working with issues around porn is how to coach somebody to transition from an indirect route to pleasure to a direct route to pleasure.
Yeah.
So rather than having the awareness in the mind or in fantasy or in memory or in a projection of the future, the awareness is on the sensation of the physical body. How does it feel to rest my hands on my heart? How does it feel for my hands to be stroking my thighs, and to really be to attend to every single sensation? And we can approach this as a practice, as a meditation. And around that, there's a whole area of practice called Orgasmic Yoga. And that's what it's a practice to cultivate the increase of sensitivity in the body. And part of my work is to coach this, and then to combine it with ways of communicating with our partners, with our lovers, what feels good for us, and how to ask for what we want.
Yeah, because we're always guessing, aren't we? You know, especially in the bedroom. You know, it's you seem to make assumptions, or you're playing guessing games, and we've sort of lost our voice to actually ask for what we want and what feels good.
I don't think we ever had a voice.
Yeah.
You know, one sex educator, her name escapes me, talks about we learn about sex through a combination of guesswork, playground rumours, and pornography. That's all we get.
Yeah.
If you're lucky, your biology teacher told you how to put a condom on a test tube.
Yeah.
But beyond that, it's pretty hopeless.
Yeah.
So this work is something I'm really passionate about, and it's so needed.
Absolutely.
And it's simple.
It is simple, isn't it? I think, again, it just comes back to communication, doesn't it? You know, I think we in the West haven't really been taught how to navigate communicating with other people, you know, whether it's a family member or friends. You know, talking about nonviolent communication, and, you know, you touched on it before about the way we all have these old paradigms, these habitual patterns that just seem to react out every day. We're getting yesterday and we're putting it onto today, and inevitably we're just fast asleep, aren't we? You've mentioned awareness a lot there, and I think, you know, even having a meditation practice on exploring the likes of psilocybin and in a container of microdosing, it just gives you that like heightened sense of awareness, doesn't it, for you to obviously notice the things that have gone unnoticed, and sort of break them old paradigms, them old habit patterns where you're not supposed the victim of your condition anymore, but the master of your moments, and you can create a new future. But it comes down to education, doesn't it? You know, we just think we've been misinformed, and I think when we're truly educated on how to navigate our experiences and being human, how to relate to others, how to be present and hold space and explore different levels of pleasure, then it's we're getting to master our experience, you know, being here. I suppose the art of living, isn't it?
Absolutely, it is. It's the art of living. One thing you've touched upon with noticing, one of the questions that we ask is, what are you noticing?
Yeah.
And just by asking somebody that question, it's an invitation to bring awareness into the body.
Absolutely.
What's happening right now in the body. And nonviolent communication is something I really love. It's been really helpful to me. The language of life, as Marshall Rosenberg called it, is for many people a really helpful starting place to gain responsibility and develop responsibility for our moment by moment experience.
Yeah.
In your yoga class today, you spoke about being responsible, self-responsibility. I like to break that word down and into responsibility, the ability to respond.
Yeah.
If our awareness isn't in our bodies, if we're not aware of what we're noticing, how can we respond? We're always in reaction.
Absolutely.
A great practice for many people is nonviolent communication.
Yeah.
And I've been working with that for a number of years, and also with clean language.
Yeah.
Which is another modality I encourage people to explore. And a third influence in my communication work is non-evaluative language. And this is something which is completely habitual in our way of speaking to each other, even in positive ways. So, for example, if I see a musician playing a song that I really love, the first thing habitually I'd go to say is, that was amazing. That was really great. But in doing that, I'm making an evaluation. I'm assessing and I'm judging what that person's just done as being amazing or as being great. And what my practice is when I catch myself speaking that way, is to bring my awareness back into my body. And what do I feel? When you played that song, I felt elated.
Yeah.
And to receive feedback in that way, and to receive communication in that way, for so many people is so much more helpful.
Absolutely.
Than to be judged.
Yeah.
Even if it's a positive judgment. And so this practice of continuously bringing our awareness back into our bodies, to notice what's happening right now in my body.
Yeah.
This is where we can really cultivate our sovereignty and our ability to respond.
It's where the magic is, isn't it? You know,
Absolutely.
We've got multi-levels of intelligence, and it's all in the body. I think we live, we live in the intellect. We're so cerebral nowadays, and constantly overthinking, and this level of overthinking can actually cause so much stress in our lives. Stress is the silent killer, and what you're talking about here is unconsciously reacting versus conscious response. It's two ends of the spectrum, isn't it? And
Absolutely.
I think there's an element of when you're really learning how to capture your uncaught mind and rest in awareness, cultivate awareness, ground in awareness, then you're in great possibility. And it gives you then a platform for you to respond and take responsibility. I think a lot of people, they just tend to play the victim, but they don't even know they're playing the victim, and always sort of complaining and moaning, and it's just a low level of, it's like a low vibration, isn't it, which really doesn't get anyone anywhere. I think a lot of people, from my perspective, is no one really wants to take ownership over their own stuff. It's quite a difficult, it's to look in the mirror and to own your own stuff. It's we're talking about the shadow here, and it's not a hot topic, is it really?
Not at all. One of the things that my brothers in Gabon they talk about is being courageous and having courage, and it's a word that I don't hear used so much in the UK, but it's something that I'm really admiring, and it takes courage to look at our stuff, to look in the mirror, and it takes the willingness and the courage to be vulnerable. If we're continuously expressing ourselves from our own felt experience, every time we speak, we're sharing an aspect of our inner world, and that does take courage. And if in our life experience it's been unsafe, if there have been consequences to share what's really going on inside ourselves, then there's a reluctance to do that. There's a protective aspect of the ego which will shut that down, and it's much safer and it's much easier most of the time for most people to live in projections.
To wear a mask.
And so a big part of our self-work to regain our sovereignty is to strip away those masks, and to develop the courage to share what's really happening,
and to be yourself, isn't it?
Be ourselves, ultimately.
That level of vulnerability, I think it's seen as a weakness, isn't it? When it's probably our greatest strength to rest in oneself, and to be as you are, remove them masks, and then I think unfortunately people feel as if being yourself, no one's going to love you, so everyone's maybe promoting self-image. There's an element of the ego always wanting to be seen. So maybe a lot of people, and I've done it myself, you manipulate your surroundings to promote self-image, really. And it's just that level of ego just wanting to be noticed, because until anyone really claps their eyes on you, you don't exist to the world, I suppose. But it's great to talk about, because it's anyone listening here, it just gives you a level of perspective and understanding to take a look in the mirror, own your own stuff, notice if you are neatly projecting onto other people, and then how to cultivate awareness. What do you have, any daily rituals that helps you to really sharpen that awareness and to ground into that way of being?
So from my Druid practice, there are three daily rituals that I've got. One is a divination practice, using an Irish tree alphabet called Ogham or Ogham, and so I cast a daily divination, and that's a way of me receiving spontaneous guidance of what I might expect to happen in the day, and also to create seed thoughts in my mind for things I might want to explore. The second is a meditation practice, which comes from the Western mystery schools, originally called Discursive Meditation. So rather than bringing the mind to stillness or to the breath, the mind is trained to follow a single thought to its conclusion, or to the possibilities which unfold from it. So I might read some nature poetry, or if there's something somebody shares in the day that inspires me, I just keep a notebook. I use Evernote now. I've embraced technology in that respect. And these become the seed thoughts of my meditations.
Nice.
That's part of my practice. And the third part is a Druid ritual of invoking the powers of nature. to be with me for that day.
Yeah, lovely.
So they're my daily practices. But also, for the last couple of years, I've really been on a journey with yoga too.
Nice.
It's something that I tried on and off for maybe 10 years, but it's one of those things that only with a daily practice did I really discover the incredible benefits that it's brought to my life.
Yeah.
And so I'm super passionate about getting on the mat as much as possible now.
I mean, it was great. We had you in the class today, and I was fortunate enough to lead you through a session, and it was just great to have you in the room. And I think what I've come to really understand about the practice is it is about getting in the body. This embodiment, getting in the body, feeling your way into these nooks and crannies, and opening up, cultivating your gifts through the practice. And creating space for revelations and insights. It's been a wonderful practice for me. I've been practicing for years, and to guide people through a session and to really witness the power of the practice, individually and collectively, it's powerful stuff. Yeah. What type of practice are you into at the moment? Just more of a flow and sequence? Yeah.
Yeah. So what I got really into is YouTube yoga.
Yeah.
So I was practicing at home, but only in the last 6 months I've realised the benefit of a teacher.
Yeah.
And how important it is to have a teacher. So I've kind of picked up lots of bad habits through feeling my own way through.
Yeah. Nice to be part of a team as well.
Absolutely.
And that's like that group consciousness, isn't
Completely. And in the same way as a ceremony, same way as going to a music concert together to practice, or meditation together to practice yoga together. There's definitely something that's created by the unique constellation of that group of people gathering in that moment that I can't get off YouTube.
Yeah, it's powerful, isn't it? People breathing together, people, flowing together, and also just like expressing vulnerability and getting out your own way. It's powerful, and again, it's really great to actually see a lot of people coming to the practice in Liverpool. There's been so many yoga studios opening up over the last few years, and I think the hot yoga studios where people have like, what's this hot yoga all about? And people are maybe coming at it maybe for the wrong reasons at the start. Maybe everyone's got their own reasons for coming to the practice. Maybe losing a bit of weight, or it's a little bit of a hip thing to crack on with. And then next minute, you start to really, there's instant afterglows after the practice, isn't it? There's an element of just feeling a lot more radiance. And I think if you get the right teacher who inspires you to actually cultivate your gifts and use the practice, because what we do in the room, it's important to apply it into your everyday life, isn't it? Coming into a yoga class and connecting to that source and that divinity and cultivating your gifts, but maybe then going outside and reacting unconsciously, it's not really going to work, isn't it? So it's having the tools to apply what you're learning, whether it is ceremony, whether it is yoga, to everyday life, moment to moment situations, because that's where life is, isn't it? It's I think we look everywhere else apart from the present moments. A lot of people sort of are in this what's next syndrome. They're always in the future, and I think this is why a lot of people are struggling with like anxiety and depression. Mental health is on the rise all the time. It's just because there's a level of overthinking. So getting into the body, it's just an opportunity to get out the mind, feel into into what's available, and then to apply the gifts that you're cultivating in these classes to best serve the world.
Absolutely. I loved what you said about the instant afterglow of a yoga practice, and it reminds me of Diana Richardson, who I mentioned, and when she's talking about lovemaking, she says, let afterwards be your teacher. And that's the guide for everything we do, whether it's the food we eat, whether it's the practices we start. How do I feel afterwards?
Yeah.
And that's the perfect teacher.
Yeah.
What's my body saying right now?
Yeah.
And if we're doing a hot yoga practice, then...
Absolutely. I remember doing my first hot yoga practice, and it actually gave me the same buzz that I had on the dance floor. That like that real, that joy, that level of ecstasy. But it was... it was pure, I've been in the class, I thought I've arrived into something here. This is powerful, and the afterglow again was incredibly. It was potent, and that allowed me to explore my own modalities. I've been practicing again yoga for a number of years, and cultivating a meditation practice. Which has took me on a whole journey of personal growth and self-development, and plugging in each morning. Having this morning routine. I know we were talking about morning routines before, and having this morning routine where it's really selfish. Actually, I probably spend about an hour and a half, 2 hours to myself. Where I'm training awareness, I'm connecting to the divine. And that comes in with like having a little workout, getting the blood flowing, and cold water therapy as well. I've been exploring that for the last year, which has been I think it's always pushing the boundary, going to the edge. We tend to get in a comfort zone quite a lot, don't we? And the growth is when you're sort of exploring them edges. But it's not easy cultivating, morning routines and healthy habits. And so yeah, it's interesting to hear how you're navigating your experiences in that way and enjoying the yoga. I know you just recently got a new partner, and she was in the yoga studio this morning. How are you getting on with that? New love and moving forward.
Yeah, it was quite unexpected actually. We met last summer, and Diane is a yoga teacher, and she's also a somatic sex educator and an academic, and she's living in New Orleans at the moment studying. So we've been traveling together, and we go to New York in a couple of days to teach some workshops, and then I'll be in New Orleans for a couple of months.
Yeah, love. You've been there before?
No, first time.
Looking forward to it?
I am.
Yeah,
I am. So it's been great. We've come from very different backgrounds, but we've got lots of common experiences and lots of shared interests, and so
yeah, nice.
Yeah, it's really beautiful to be able to share so much of my life with somebody. And
yeah.
I
think with their music influences, obviously being a DJ and going on the whole journey, going to New Orleans, like the music out there, it's with the influences. Yeah, but you're really looking forward to it.
Yeah, I can't wait.
Yeah, nice. What's the summer looking like for you, Gav? Have you got much on this year? I know you're moving into creating a housing co-op at the moment down in, is it Devon, is it, or?
Yeah, well, somewhere maybe Devon, Somerset. We haven't found the area we definitely want to be in yet, but yeah, we've formed a housing cooperative, and so we'll be looking for land that's at least 70 metres above sea level.
Yeah. Wow.
That's got space for us to develop a small holding and to build some cob structures.
Yeah.
And that'll be a place where we can run our trainings from, run our workshops from.
Yeah.
But also to live together in community.
Yeah.
And to break down the idea of nuclear families.
Yeah.
And
it's a Christian philosophy, that, isn't it?
Maybe, yeah. I hadn't thought of it, but maybe it is.
Yeah, it comes from that farming and agriculture, the Christian philosophy. I think I know you've learned a lot again coming back to Gabon. How these tribes live. You know what I mean? There's definitely more of an openness, isn't it? But there seems to be this level of sacredness and understanding between how to live with one another and how to navigate relationship.
Absolutely. One thing I witness a lot in the village where I go to is that there isn't as much privacy as what we're used to. So everybody knows everybody's business all of the time, and that's challenging. But also it means there's nowhere to hide.
Yeah.
And all of our stuff is out all of the time, and as challenging as that is, there's also an incredible support.
Yeah.
And there's no way for us to keep aspects of our lives hidden.
Yeah.
And so it's not a choice to be vulnerable. It's not a choice to expose ourselves. Everybody's seen everything all the time.
Yeah.
And it's a very inspiring way for me to live when I'm in Gabon.
Yeah, nice.
And it's that which I want to bring back.
Yeah, beautiful.
Here to the UK.
And weave it into your teachings.
Absolutely, and for different generations to be living together, for children and elders, for aunties and uncles to be raising all of the children in the village is, to me it makes a lot more sense.
Yeah, powerful stuff. And how many people is it that you're looking to live with? Is there? I know there's a little gang.
Yeah, there's a core of us, about 7 people who will be the core collective members, and then I'm interested in things like workaway and woofing, so bringing people who want to gain certain skills and who want to experience what it's like to live as part of a community.
Yeah, lovely.
To come and stay with us for
Powerful.
shorter or longer periods of time.
Yeah, and obviously exploring them healing modalities, you know, with entheogens, being a sexual therapist, being a sound therapist, it's probably all coming under one bracket. It's like a dream vision, really, isn't it? And,
absolutely.
And, you know, you're living your dream, I suppose. You know, you're doing the things which light you up. You know, you're moving into the things that actually give you pleasure in the world, celebrating your unique gifts and talents. I, for one, have enjoyed, you know, our friendship and how we're developing. And I've learned a lot from you, you know, as a man. I think it takes time to become a man, doesn't it? You know, it takes experience and to hang around with people who are just demonstrating these qualities of how to be in the world, you know, how to be vulnerable, how to be authentic. It's incredibly nourishing. I think nowadays there's such a, you know, when we're talking about men's health, you know, the suicide rates, it's just through the roof, isn't it? I think compared to women, I think it's like nearly 89% of suicide, it's male related. I know you've done some work around with men's work in the past, haven't you? You used to have a circle in Manchester, and are you still active in them circles? Or
I don't get up to Manchester really at all anymore, but the group that I started with, two friends, is still running. It's really well attended every month, and some amazing practitioners are part of that group, and so there are lots of modalities which are on offer, and there's a nominal charge which covers the hire of the room, and so it's a way for any men to come and be together and to experience transformative modalities in a really accessible and supportive and held way. We're
just not so holistic, are we, as men? I think when young boys, it's not okay to cry, it's not okay to you know, to be vulnerable. It's, you know, it's man up your pussy and all this kind of stuff, and it's just, it shuts us down, really, doesn't it? It shuts the body down, and it just doesn't allow us to really explore, I suppose, mature masculinity.
I was really fortunate in that way, in that I was brought up by strong women. And I've had very inspiring women teachers right through my life. So, I feel really blessed to have had a more balanced way. But that is a typical experience of many men. Yeah, many men I work with. And the other thing that I think is missing for us in the West is initiation. Yeah, I really believe that on the cusp of manhood, as part of our evolution, we crave some kind of initiation, and when we don't have that urge expresses itself in destructive ways. Yeah. Whether that's whether it's drugs, whether it's prison, whether it's gangs, whatever it might be. There seems to be something in us. Yeah, but longing really, to belong to something, aren't we? Longing to belong, but also longing for an experience of real danger. Yeah. Of taking a great risk. Yeah. I think again it has a profound effect in consciousness of what it does for us to humble ourselves and to take that real risk in our as we become men. Well, you know, we're talking about initiation here. What do you feel like maybe your first real initiation into manhood was? If you can maybe pluck that out to your experiences because I think in the West, you know, maybe coming from Liverpool, your first initiation was like, you know, when was you know, I suppose when the first time you had sex with a girl, or, you know, there's quite unhealthy initiations, you know, from where I've come from anyway, and if we can maybe reference, you know, the likes of Gabon, or some of the other traditions that you felt into, there's a lot of like healthy initiations, isn't it, into manhood, you know, where maybe the boy is taken away from the mother, and he spends time with, you know, the grandfathers, the fathers, the uncles, and having these experiences of, you know, whether it is plant medicine or vision quest or hunting, it helps the psyche to grow and to mature. I think nowadays a lot of men, they look like men, but they're really still navigating from the psyche of a boy, and it's so yeah. Talk me through that. I think you're absolutely right. I think there needs to be this initiatory process where we can be jolted into a very different way of being in the world. how we can recreate that here, I don't know. I went to Central Africa to do it for myself. But when I was a teenager, it was drugs for me. I was kind of pushing the boundaries. I was seeing how far it goes, and I overdosed when I was 17 on cocaine.
Wow.
And almost died. And I'm really convinced that was that longing, that urge.
Yeah.
That was part of my vessel to seek initiation.
Yeah.
But there was nothing around.
Yeah. I think young boys, they're just looking to be blessed, aren't they, by elders, by older men, and you know, they just that level of presence by mature men, you know, who just have a level of you know, warrior energy, balance, groundedness. We're lacking it in the West, aren't we? You know, I think from the perspective of living in Liverpool, there's a lot of warrior energy here, and Liverpool people are really gritty. But I think there's maybe overactive warrior energy, and we're missing out them other archetypal energies. You know, I know, maybe talking about Jungian psychology and referencing the four archetypes: the king, warrior, the magician, and the lover. They all go hand in hand, don't they? The four of them. And when you really take a good look at the way you maybe have behaved or the way to behave, it's a map, a conscious map to walk the terrain of manhood. And I think, my initiation, I suppose, into mature manhood, I was lucky. I went to Texas when I was 18. And I spent 3 months away from the home, away from that family dynamic. And I was in the adult world, and I was on my own. I was on a tennis ranch, but there was a level of initiation there. I came back and I felt I'd grown into a man, and then, throughout my 20s, being a tennis coach and being surrounded by professional people. There was just a slow, organic shift into manhood, and becoming a father, exploring psychedelics myself, and then obviously opening up Planet Yoga, and holding that space. It's lifted me into this mature energy, but it takes time to get to that place,
Definitely. And I just admire how much you've created here and the incredible work that I see happening. But your father's been a huge presence.
Absolutely.
I understand, in your life too.
Yeah.
And I think that's something which is missing for so many young men. I didn't have a present father.
Yeah.
And
men are raised by women, really, aren't they? By the mothers.
Yeah. Who again are raising a family, but also often my mum was bringing all the money into the home as well at the same time. And how can we ever expect one person to do that? Yeah,
absolutely.
And that's really what I think's missing, and that's where cooperative living and growing families together as a community is, as I see it, the only way forward for us to really heal this wound we have in our family units.
Absolutely. And what elders have you got around you at the moment? So, men that really sort of hold the space for you.
Well, the thing I've looked for a father my whole life, and going to Gabon, the man who initiated me into Bwiti, my spiritual father, is a man called Tateo, and meeting him and developing a relationship with him has been such a completion in my life. I just feel it's something I've been searching for since I was a child, and I found it when I was 32.
Wow.
So he's one of the biggest influences in terms of an elder man.
Yeah, lovely.
In my life, the wisdom he carries from his experiences, and again a lifetime of working with Iboga. I met someone who had cured a heroin addiction, or cleared a heroin addiction, using ibogaine, which is the main alkaloid extract of Iboga. And he described the Iboga experience as one big guilt trip, and you might die. and what he's alluding to is the process of self-clarification and self-reflection, which the wood brings on of going back through our lives and seeing all of the moments in horrifying detail of when we've been out of alignment, and when we have been selfish, and when the ego has been rampant. And so for the elders I meet in Gabon, who spent a lifetime in that work, they've reached a level of stillness and presence in their being, which is such a huge influence on me.
I mean, talking about presence, it's probably the greatest gift, isn't it? You know, you can give humanity, you know, just to be there. You know, we're known as human beings, and to be there as a human and to be present with inevitably what's in front of you, that's where the magic is. You know, it's the very deeply textured here and now, isn't it? But it's lovely to hear, you know, your stories of going to Gabon and being initiated. But you checked in there that, you know, a lot of people use that medicine to heal from addiction. And I suppose addiction is just that level of longing, really, isn't it? You know, so yeah, Ibogaine is that is helping to.
Yeah, in a huge way.
How have you seen that? Have you seen it firsthand? Like,
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. I really admire the work of Gabor Mate, Dr. Gabor Mate, who's doing remarkable work with addictions, and he talks about drug addiction as being a symptom.
Yeah.
Of a social problem, of a family problem.
Yeah.
And what Ibogaine on a chemical level, it blocks the receptors. As I understand it, and rewires the neural pathways. But this was something that was discovered by accident. It's not how it's used in Gabon, but in the West, the reason most people have heard about Iboga is because of its power to completely eradicate many addictions, many substance addictions, and also change patterns of behaviour. Yeah,
and that's why people use a lot of psychedelics in a ceremonial way, because there's a level of healing that they're looking to feel into, I believe.
Absolutely. I understand the psyche in all moments seeks integration. And if we can integrate our traumatic experiences, if we can integrate our experiences of not feeling like we belong, then those addictive behaviours and compulsive patterns of behaviour don't have any power over us anymore. And that's really where I think psychedelics can help, and they are helping so many people.
Yeah, absolutely. That's lovely to hear. How do you nourish yourself? You know, are you a vegan?
Oh, that's a great question. Well, I suppose before I talk about food, I just would love to link back to something you mentioned earlier about being selfish in a morning ritual. And I love the idea of being selfful rather than being selfish.
Yeah.
And I think the 1 to 2 hours you mentioned every morning is a bare minimum for any of us who feel inspired to live a life of service.
Yeah.
Unless we're fully meeting our own needs, I don't think we can act in optimum generosity in our lives. So those morning rituals are completely vital for us to be complete within ourselves and to give from an overflowing cup.
Absolutely.
And diet plays into that also. So for about 10 years, I was a really strict vegan, and I did a peyote ceremony in a Mexican tradition. And at the end of this very long ceremony, there are 3 sacred foods which are brought into the teepee, and they are corn, fruit, and deer. And as this plate of venison was passed around in small cubes, I thought, if there's ever a time I'm going to eat meat again, it's now. And I took a cube of venison, and as I ate it, I just felt superpowers in my body. Wow. The strength immediately, again heightened by the huge amount of peyote I'd eaten through the night, felt so deeply nourishing that for 2 weeks after, I ate like a carnivorous caveman. And so I began to eat wild meat. And in doing so, I'd kind of read all of the usual things people read when they become vegans, and I'd seen some of the documentaries that kind of went viral around that movement. And my current understanding about it is that if we're living in Britain, then it's unsustainable to be a vegan. And I know that's controversial and probably very unpopular, but it's the conclusion I came to, because if we're gonna get the amount of calories we need to sustain our lives, and the only way we can do it without eating animal products is by importing foods. And so every time we buy coconut water, or we buy rice, or we buy any of the foods that nourish ourselves that aren't grown in Britain, if they're flown by plane, then we're supporting the petrochemical industry, which is globally destroying the rainforests, driving millions of creatures to extinction. And so every food decision we make, we're saying yes to something.
Yeah.
So every time we're buying imported food, especially those flown by aeroplane, mangoes, jackfruits, pineapples, cacao, all of the things that I still really do love to eat, if I'm being truly honest with myself, I'm saying yes to that petrochemical industry that is completely destroying the rainforests. And so I think the optimum diet for somebody living in Britain is mostly plant-based, but supplemented with wild meat. And venison is the obvious choice. It's very low in fat. Because we've got no wolves left in Britain, if we leave deer naturally in the woodlands, they destroy the woodlands. And so we need to cull them every year. So to maintain healthy populations, they need to be culled. Yeah. So we've got all of these carcasses being created every single year. And so the most ethical thing, to my mind, is to eat these carcasses respectfully, for them to be shot humanely, and for us to transition to live in a truly sustainable way. And I think what happens often with the meat and veganism argument is two different issues get conflated. One is the meat industry, and the other is eating meat. And they're two very different things. And of course, I do abhor the meat industry and the industrial and inhumane way of raising and slaughtering animals. But to eat wild meat from the land we live on, I think is a really important way of transitioning back to a sustainable way of living within nature's cycles. Yeah. And some of the things I've seen recently about, there's a new documentary, which the name has slipped my mind. That's very interesting and talks about how health-giving it is to be vegan. The science all makes sense to me. Yeah. But it's not sustainable for the population.
Game Changers. That one,
that's the one.
On Netflix.
Brilliant science.
Yeah.
To my mind, unquestionable, but completely unsustainable for the population of Britain. And also, I wonder how that is over a 30 or 40 or 50 year period. If we do that for a long period of time. And the honest answer is we don't know.
We don't know.
But in terms of sustainability, what we do know is the more we can take a step back from investing in petrol-based industry, the better for ourselves, the better for our communities, and the better for the earth.
Yeah. I mean, just coming to that thought of we don't actually know, do we? And that level of uncertainty. I think, again, most people, we were talking about, you said self-full there, and a lot of people are just really selfish and they don't take any of this into consideration, do they? And they're just flippantly just like eating what they want when they want and not really taking any responsibility. We're talking about even recycling here, plastic and stuff like that. It takes the many, doesn't it, to really start to shift. But I suppose that comes from a level of awareness. We're back talking about consciousness here. It's totally, people need to just wake up, don't they? And unfortunately, I think we are conditioned as a species to be asleep. This sort of left brain conditioning to stand in line, to do as you're told, to work 40 hours a week, to work for 40 years, to work for somebody else. Basically a cog in a massive machine, aren't we? Yeah. We lose out, our birthright, our sovereign right to be free. And
we're very profitable.
Yeah,
to some people,
absolutely,
in that state. And going back to veganism, in relation to that, the huge success, I think, of the vegan movement is how huge changes being made by individual people making personal pledges. Yeah. That is such an incredible model to create global change. I see the whole Extinction Rebellion movement, for example, which I really don't support in any way at all, because at its foundation, it's about demanding other people make changes. Yeah. But the missed opportunity, in my opinion, of something like Extinction Rebellion is the amount of people who are engaged in that movement and the amount of reach they have. If they use veganism as a model, if every single person who went to block roads and got in the way of commuters trying to get to work in all those Extinction Rebellion protests, every single one of those people made a pledge to never buy food in plastic again. we'd have instant global change.
Absolutely.
All of the supermarkets throughout the world look at veganism. Every restaurant, every cafe, every motorway service station now has a vegan menu.
Yeah.
And that all comes from individuals making a personal pledge to not consume animal products anymore,
Yeah.
and inspiring the people around them
Absolutely.
by their own actions.
Yeah.
And that is a grassroots movement, and it's such a potent model that we can all learn from.
Absolutely.
And my prayer for the whole Extinction Rebellion movement and for all of the climate activist people is that we learn from the vegans.
Yeah.
And we copy their model, and we can really make a huge difference in that way.
I mean, just thinking on there, I remember watching a show with David Attenborough in it, and it was about plastic. And I think there was just one or two documentaries on the whole plastic situation on the planet, and I think just that one episode has literally changed the relationship that a lot of people are having with plastic in the world. I don't know the figures and the facts, but I know there's now and then you see the numbers, on like whether it's Instagram and Google, how there's been a big shift in that level of consciousness and waking people up to the fact that if we don't actually do something about it, then we may not be here much longer. We've got to be the change, haven't we, that we want to see in the world. And but a lot of the time it takes a crisis, doesn't it, for people to act upon it. And it's just changing that mindset, really, isn't it?
Absolutely. And the most effective way I've witnessed in this life to do that is to make a personal pledge.
Yeah.
And I've really got to acknowledge my own hypocrisy in that. I was drinking water out of a plastic bottle today. And I've just bought a mobile phone after not using a phone for a few years. So I'm as much a part of the problem as anybody else. But it's finding the ways we can to make those changes as soon as we can.
Yeah. I mean, personally, I'd like to really think and believe that the work you're doing individually on yourself and has a massive collective ripple effect, into so many people's lives. You stepping up into manhood and using your own education and direct experience to serve the world. You talked about service there, and cultivating these morning routines which just allow you to serve. I'm sure you have a high value in actually serving other people and get an incredible amount of pleasure from it.
Absolutely. I think it's inherently pleasurable to be in service when our needs are met. And I'm just thinking about morning routines and making those habitual changes. And there's a book I completely recommend called Atomic Habits.
Yeah, by James Clear.
Yeah,
it's a great book.
Yeah, that was really huge for me when I read it.
It's a game changer, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Inserting new behaviours into stacks of habits.
Yeah.
It's been huge for me.
Yeah, he talks about small wins, doesn't he?
Yes.
Just these like small wins over a period of time have enormous impact, on our life and our mindset and changing perspectives. And it's a container for us to upgrade, I suppose. Level up and and just being in the world from an exalted place.
Absolutely. I love that, an exalted place.
Awesome. Okay, so I think we're going to start wrapping this one up, Gavin. It's been a pleasure having you here. I always love you having in Planet Yoga, and we have so much fun together. I love being around you. I think you're an awesome fella, great brother of mine. You teach me so much about myself, and you just demonstrate them qualities, of what it means to be a man in the world today. And you're a great mirror for me, and I really I'm always excited for you to come back to Planet Yoga and share your magic. So yeah, is anything else you'd like to share and to finish off?
Just how grateful I'm feeling to be here and for you to invite me to speak, and for everything you do, and all of the people you've brought into my life.
Yeah, lovely.
Who I come here once a month to share some of my Druid rituals. But the blessings I receive and the stories and the laughter stays with me long after I go back down to Devon.
There's a lovely afterglow, isn't there? I think
for sure.
There's like an extended family, of all the musicians that you keep bringing to Planet Yoga, and all the people who come to share the space and to explore themselves a little bit intimately. And yeah, it's become like this extended family, you know, and there's so much, it's so real, isn't it? It feels really authentic and nourishing, and there's one thing about, I suppose, Planet Yoga and my journey here is it's the people I've met, you know what I mean? The people I've met and the relationships I've formed over a period of time has, you know, is the one thing that just warms the heart, and makes it all worthwhile. Because it's not easy sometimes, you know, holding the space, as you know, and being the caretaker and opening the door every day. You know, you'd have your ups and your downs, but it's all been character building. It's all been worth it. So again, I really appreciate you being here and all the gifts you've brought to Planet Yoga over the years. And I'm looking forward to many more, explorations, you know, internally and externally in the future.
In all the realms.
Absolutely, in all the realms, for sure. So have a great summer. You know, I'm looking forward to seeing you soon, and enjoy everything that you're doing.
Thank you.
Good man. Thank you. Basi. So we're just going to finish off maybe having a few moments on, I know you've got a lovely harp there, the Bwiti harp.
Sure, yeah, this was handmade by my harp teacher,
wow.
Bukaye.
Yeah, so if you could maybe give us a bit of a tune, and then we'll close it down, we'll shut it off, and then that's it, we're out of here.
I'd love to.
Lovely. Thank you.
Nimana kompende ganga Bukaye. Ai, wanye, hey.
Creating Space is sponsored by the Scouse Guru app, an all-purpose meditation app that feeds into all your needs, developing peace of mind, increasing mental focus, lowering stress levels while discovering inner stillness, awakening your potential and educating you on all matters related to human behaviour and personal development. Download the app for free on the App Store or get it on Google Play today.